Question for you. What were the most popular movies last year? Well, according to the numbers, these are the top 10 highest grossing films of 2024. Notice anything weird about them? They're all sequels or continuing storylines. Meanwhile, the movies that are original, the movies that audiences have apparently been clamoring for, go unnoticed and perform poorly. Like this year's Oscar winner, Nora. If you're not a big budget superhero Disney movie, you're not raking in the big bucks. But also, if you're a big budget superhero Disney movie, you're not raking in the big bucks. So what's going on? I'm sure there are tons of video essayists out there that can tell you what's going on. So that's not my real question for you. My real question is who started it? And it's not Bob Iger. What do you think of when you think of the 1970s? You think of this? That was considered cool, and it always will be. And you have great movies coming out in theaters. You got Jaws, you got The Godfather, you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I didn't like, but still. And you have the biggest film of that decade, in my opinion. Let's stick with Jaws and Star Wars. Who made those two movies? Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. That's right, you get a gold star. Come here. Both of these movies were fairly well received, but what they didn't know was that these two men would destroy Hollywood from the inside out. Cliffhanger, ooh. The summer blockbuster, the way Hollywood mainly functions now, came from the 1970s from Star Wars and Jaws. By the time the 80s rolled around, there were a slew of sequels to those original movies. All the 70s movies seem to need to get a sequel too. In fact, I'll read out the sequels that came out this year. The Empire Strikes Back, Jaws 3, Aliens, Halloween 2, Indiana Jones 2 and 3, 500 more Rocky movies, Back to the Future 2, and Airplane 2. The world was not ready for Airplane 2.
Miss, are you telling us absolutely everything?
Not exactly. We're also out of coffee.
This was the birth of the modern franchise, led in part by Spielberg and Lucas. I don't want anyone to get the idea that cinema was destroyed in the 80s. No, that was the 2000s. The 80s laid the groundwork. In 1985, the biggest movie of the year was Back to the Future, a completely original idea. But the 80s set up the idea for trilogies and franchises to do very, very well and to sell and market toys towards kids. Now I'm sure you're wondering how any of this is George Lucas and Steven Spielberg's fault. I'm not too accustomed to just complaining on this channel, so before I start insulting Steven Spielberg, I want to preface it by saying that when I was doing research for this video, I kept coming across people saying,
Who is asking for this?
Like, really? Moana? Did we need more Moana?
Who asked for this? Who said yes? Who needs to be held responsible? Who do we need to line up in the backyard?
As if Hollywood goes around polling people of what movies they want to see. Who asked for Inception? Who asked for Home Alone? Who asked for Iron Man? No one. Well, I think what people are trying to say is that no one remotely desired to see anything like this, and now that they have seen it, they're deeply disappointed. It's not just Hollywood making some random stuff. Well, I mean, it is Hollywood making random stuff. It's just something you don't like. Okay. No more Mr. Nice Guy. In the 1990s, you have two remakes of previous films that I want to talk about. Hook and The Flintstones, both of which were attached to Steven Spielberg, and both did extremely well in theaters, which goes to prove that Spielberg can make a movie about almost anything and still make a lot of money. But when Spielberg went the producing route, many of the movies he helped make were guaranteed successes based off of his name and the intellectual property they're based off of. It was still risky to make a movie like Transformers, but not as risky as making a movie like Indiana Jones. Now we're going to focus on George Lucas. The 90s and aughts brought us Lucas's continued story of the galaxy far, far away, and it kind of sucked. Even though people are starting to change their minds now because of how hated the sequel trilogy is, it's still safe to say that the prequel trilogy isn't exactly a gold standard on storytelling. What the prequel trilogy did do was start off a franchise. Really quick, I want to note that I'm defining a franchise as a merchandisable movie with more than 3 films. So Star Wars became a franchise right after episode 1. I think it's important for a franchise to be geared towards kids, but that's not necessarily true because the Fast and Furious franchise and The Matrix are not geared towards kids and yet are still franchises. Okay, back to the video. The first episode of Star Wars grossed $1 billion, and studios took notice. Then you had Fast and Furious come out, and Transformers, and before you know it, if you have a story, it better be a franchisable story to market towards teens. Disney took a big hold of this since they have a huge child market. I don't like how that came out. You see, most of Disney's money won't come from their movies, but from their theme parks and the stuff they sell to their kids. So it makes sense for them to want to make franchises geared towards kids because that's super easy to market. It's better than making a whole new idea. Who wants that? That's why superhero franchises are doing so well and why studios keep churning them out. I've heard people say, oh, X superhero didn't do well at the box office. It flopped. Like he's not going to make a ton of money from toy sales. Do you think Snow White isn't going to recoup his costs? It probably not. It's not controversial to say that the 2000s was not the greatest decade for film. Yes, there were very, very good movies that came out that year, as well as higher quality television, but the modern blockbuster began to suffer from what I like to call, if they watched it once, they watched it again, itosis. A sequel is not necessarily bad, case in point The Dark Knight, but my point is that Spielberg and Lucas helped make the modern blockbuster and helped make reliable studio films that were open-ended enough to create a franchise from. And that creates issues for smaller filmmakers such as myself, as well as original ideas in general. You like Terminator? You like Terminator 2? Then you'll love T3! Whatever got made in the 90s and 80s, people said, heck, let's do it again. By 2012, George Lucas had sold the rights to Star Wars to Disney, and here we are. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, two men that tried to tell fun stories and change Hollywood, only to be caught in the soulless cash grab for merchandise and kids' toys.
Now you have become the very thing you swore to destroy.
Well, not necessarily. You see, I agree with Quentin Tarantino that up until 2019, movies are pretty good. Have we forgotten how big Marvel was? I just watched an old, it's not that old, trailer from Black Panther, and I got excited all over again. That movie was so important to young me, and now I'm kind of worried because I don't know what movie other kids are getting excited for now, other than...
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
So what? Is the 2020s the end of movies as we know them? Will the Russo brothers force us to watch The Electric State over and over again? I say thee nay! Instead, I shall do a call to action. Studios sing this song. And that's what they'll listen to. If you watch independent movies or movies with smaller budgets instead of whatever Disney puts out, they'll take notice. Share this video with all of your friends and tell them to share it with all of their friends so that the message gets out. And it'll help me too. And also, depending on your age and what you like, make your own movies. It's as easy as ever, believe me. Hollywood won't be around forever, but we can't let cinema die. Comment down below original movie suggestions. Also, welcome to all my new subscribers. Nice to have you on board. Thanks for watching. Until next time.